They say small towns are quiet, until the quiet starts doing things to you, moving in the night, rearranging the truth, dressing itself up like concern. I found out the hard way, on a Tuesday at 5:12 a.m., when my doorbell camera pinged and showed a woman in my backyard, standing at the edge of my pool like she owned the sunrise. That 3-second clip is the moment everything that followed felt less like an accident and more like a choice somebody made. And once you realize someone chose to hurt you, you start looking for the reasons why. My name is Ethan Rivera. I've lived on Hawthorne Ridge for 7 years, the kind of neighborhood where people know which car belongs to which family, where the HOA newsletter is more popular than the local paper, and where the board president is treated, almost worshipfully, like the mayor of everyone's life. Her name was Gloria Wells. She wore linen suits, collected invitations, and had this smile that made you think she was doing you a favor just by looking at you. She was the kind of person who called meetings and made decisions, and, for a long time, most of us thanked her for it. At first it was little things. A missing lawn gnome here, a package gone there. We shrugged, blamed Amazon, blamed kids, blamed the raccoons. Then my neighbor Lena came over one evening with a trembling cup of coffee and told me someone had rifled through her garage and moved boxes around, nothing missing, but the lock had been picked. She said, "It's like someone wanted me to know they were there." That phrase sat in my chest and started to itch. I'm a guy who pays attention to footage. Cameras are boring most of the time. Cars, dogs, mail, but they don't get dramatic. They're honest in the way a ledger is honest. So I pulled weeks of recordings, spliced them together, and at 3:43 a.m. one night there she was again. Gloria, moving from house to house, using master's keys that the HOA kept for emergencies. There she was, gently opening a shed, standing in a garage with a flashlight like she'd come to clean up someone's life. And there, on the corner of the footage, was evidence of motive. A meeting invitation from a development company, dates circled, a deposit cleared, and a notation in her handwriting, "Will push." That's when it stopped being petty and started looking like strategy. People who want others to sell sometimes make the place unbearable until they do. It's a slow, surgical sort of pressure. Notice this, escalate that, make ownership expensive emotionally. The HOA allowed community improvement projects, and under Gloria's cheerleading, they've been quietly approving permit waivers and easement changes. If you own the narrative, you own the people, and Gloria had always been very good at owning the narrative. I knew confronting her at her kitchen table would change everything. So I didn't do it. I did something worse. I invited the neighborhood. We set up a projector in the community hall, and, like a trial, I rolled footage. I watched Gloria's face when her smile started to crumble the exact second her hands tightened on the podium, the microphone dropping out of rhythm with the hall noise. People gasped because film is cinematic in a way gossip never is. It makes liars look small and stupid. You can't show that. Gloria snapped, voice smooth as always, and then softer. "Ethan, what do you want from me?" That line, that question felt like the last card anyone wanted to see. Her defense was practiced. Concern for property values, safety inspections, we had reports. She used the word community like a shield. But the footage had timestamps, and the timestamps had her car's license plate. People who had been on the fence started remembering a broken mailbox that matched the night of one of her visits, a threatening letter that arrived the day after someone refused to sign a waiver. Fear, which had been a private thing for months, blossomed into public outrage. Gloria didn't crack under shame. She shifted. Retaliation looked like legal letters at first, glossy envelopes with firm fonts, threats of defamation suits if we posted the footage online. Then came the phone calls at night, anonymous and corrosive. "You're making a scene. This neighborhood has no place for troublemakers. Someone keyed the side of my truck. Someone slashed the Henderson's tires." The tactics were meant to feel random, but they weren't. They were a pattern stitched into a plan. It felt like she wanted the chaos to be loud enough that people would retreat back into silence. I'm not a hero. I'm a guy who kept evidence. I'm a guy who called a lawyer who knew what a master key log should look like and dug until the HOA's records had more holes than answers. We tracked payments. There was a shadow account. Small transfers to a landscaping contractor who showed up exactly when things got out of hand. Men who did what they were told and left without looking at your face. When you follow money, it leads to people who don't want to be seen. When you follow the men, they lead back to the smile. The turning point wasn't a courtroom or a viral video. It was a late-night phone call from Carl Bishop, who managed the rental next to the old mill. "They burned down our shed," he said. "Not the whole thing, just a corner." His voice was flat, because people say the strangest things when you've been made to expect them. That fire could have been a scare. It could have been a random accident caused by a faulty grill. But it wasn't. The accelerant patterned like someone had wanted to be dramatic, and the timing lined up with one of Gloria's visits on our footage. That night something snapped in a lot of us. Fear had a smell, and it smelled like smoke. When the flames licked at the Hendersons' porch a week later, a straw fire, but real enough to send sirens, everything escalated. People who'd been quiet stepped into the light. Officer Ramirez, who'd known the ridge for years, started asking the questions no one had thought to ask. Who benefits? Who has access? Who has a history of fabricating emergencies? The county prosecutor listened because we had a string of incidents that, tied together, looked like harassment, intimidation, possibly coercion for financial gain. We were not just angry anymore. We had a pattern. The showdown was less cinematic than I expected. There were no dramatic rope-pulled arrests with lights strobing in the community hall. Instead, there were subpoenas, quiet interviews, and the kind of paperwork that ends dictators. Gloria tried to rally the neighborhood, to remind them of garden parties and holiday lights, but the script had changed. People who liked order hated the idea of being manipulated into selling by the person who'd promised to protect their property. She was indicted on a series of charges that, when read aloud, sounded like the end of something: conspiracy, intimidation, misuse of HOA funds. But after the charges came the whispers, and after the whispers came the repaired fences and the way neighbors started actually talking at the mailbox again. What surprised me was not the fall of one person, but the way the neighborhood changed shape. We rebuilt the Hendersons' porch one Saturday, paint flying, music on the radio, laughter that sounded new, and it felt less like victory and more like relief. The legal process moved slow, and slow things are messy. Some people wanted blood, others wanted to move on quietly. I found myself thinking a lot about motive. Gloria wasn't a cartoon villain. She was someone who'd been handed power and used it like currency, who had convinced herself that her decisions were for the greater good. Maybe she was afraid of change. Maybe she loved being needed. Maybe she needed to prove she could control something. The reasons didn't lessen the damage, but they made it human, a truth I think we often resist because it's easier to paint people black and white. There's a scene I replay in my head: the day Gloria walked past my house after the subpoenas, carrying a bag of yard tools like she hadn't been the architect of so many nights of fear. Her eyes met mine. There was no apology, not even regret, just a look that tried to make us forget the footage, the burned porch, the sleeplessness. I wanted to say a lot of things. Instead, I said, quietly, "You broke our trust." That's what it came down to. Not money, not property, but trust, an intangible you can't insure. I don't pretend the ending is neat. The legal case will run its course. The court will hand down penalties or plea deals, and the news cycle will turn. Some neighbors will move away, because trauma hooks itself to places, and sometimes you need distance to breathe. Others will stay, planting new flower beds and putting up motion sensor lights, a little more watchful, a little less naive. The last thing that happens in this story, at least the last thing I want to tell you, is not a tidy epilogue, but a question, one we all have to answer for ourselves. When someone whose job is to protect becomes the reason we're afraid, what do we do about it? If you were in my shoes, what would you have shared first? Would you have gone to the meeting with footage, or would you have called the lawyer and stayed out of sight? Do you believe power corrupts? Or do you believe people just make bad choices under pressure? Drop a comment below and tell me where you stand. I want to know if you'd have stayed, if you'd have fought, if you'd have packed up and left. If you've ever been in a neighborhood where the people meant to protect you became the threat, speak up, tell the story. Share this video if it resonated. And if you think justice means more than headlines, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens when communities decide to look at their leaders hard enough to see what they're holding. Thanks for listening. Sit with that question for a while. It's simple and messy, and probably more important than any one verdict. How do we build neighborhoods that protect people, not power?